in just a moment. Obiora, the deal at that Bali meeting was all about trade liberalization, agriculture, and development issues. 3 key issues that affect not just Nigeria, but most countries. So it's like it's across the board. Right. It's not just us. That's right. What does this mean in particular for Nigeria?
Now, let's take them one by one. If you look at agriculture, you saw that India was on the forefront. And for obvious reasons. You see, the thing about globalization is that it is seen generally as a situation where the developing countries are begging to collect, while the developed countries are either agreeing to give or not, which is not what it ought to be. The WTO placed everybody on a flat space. So even though the development levels are different. So it was good. The Indian minister kept pushing until at least he was able to get something. Yes, you do not want to distort the world trading system. But yes, you should also not allow people to die of hunger. In a country as large as India, if they do nothing, if they go by what they... Because that's what I think nations should do. I'm glad with what Ken said, because I don't think we've had it this good, ever. Because what it means is that everybody who was affected by what was going to happen or what was going to be presented at the negotiation had the opportunity to look at the document. Unlike, you've had situations where people go for such delegations, sign present that they have arrived, and then come back and sign attendance that they have finished. Before you know, they bring the document and nobody has really deliberated on it. So for the first time, at least, we've had a very, very good thing, because that's what nations should look at it. The EPA that came, all those, even CET and all that, you don't just sign. So I'm glad that happened. So for what that means is that not just for India, for other developing and the least developed countries, they can apply what India has secured for them to be able to ensure that they feel at least all countries can now stockpile. But of course, there are a few regulations, but it didn't go according to what the America and Europe wanted. Because if it did, of course, it would have been a disaster. Because once you have total hunger in a certain countries, the next countries are not going to be living in peace.
And then we seem to be on the right track, especially as regards the latest we have now in the agricultural sector, where we see that the federal government is really very passionate about developing that sector. So yes, we are.
Exactly, because that also increases the possibility of extending further subsidy to agriculture producers in this country. Because subsidy is key. America is giving subsidy to their farmers. Europe, they are giving subsidy to their farmers. But the fact is that, again, the big boys, like Ken said, they bring the issues to the table. They expect everybody to...
We are going to know these big boys very soon. But let's look at the other
facilitation. Trade facilitation, for me, is important to everyone that is involved in the global trade. Even, in fact, if there's anyone who stands to benefit the more, I think it's the developing countries. If you look at the LPI, the Logistics Performance Index of the World Bank, the first 10 countries are either in Europe or in America. The last 10 or even 15 are from Africa. So, and what is it talking about? Ease of movement of goods. How long does it take one? Because, you see, because that leads us to the issue of competitiveness, which Europe has been trying to help all the developing nations. So, the issue is we need to facilitate for a long time. I think we've talked about 48 hours clearing. I don't know how far we have achieved that. We've talked about, we moved from 48 to 24, even when we were unable to achieve 48. So these are the issues. So trade facilitation is key. How easy is it? Because it brings further issues like things like foreign direct investment. And then, of course, it boosts your economy. It increases employment. It adds, the entire world gains from it. So that's the agreement.
But you see, that agreement has its advantages as well as disadvantages. That's now, some have argued that trade liberalization will only encourage dumping of substandard goods into the country.
Well, that is, you see, the issue is this. For example, there is an expectation that the developing countries and the least developed countries should be making some progress. That's where I think the challenge is. It cannot continue to be us sending to them and then being unable to send to us. I think there should be a way of checking substandard goods. You have standard organization in Nigeria, just like you have it in every other country of the world. So that shouldn't be an excuse to not allowing, because free trade is beneficial to everybody. But the fact is that I still think that countries should look deeply into what they want to sign. which is what is happening now, and everybody is going to be happy about that.
Well, Ken, you actually mentioned the fact that, you know, manufacturers, Nasima, and the rest of it have actually been brought on board in making sure that this agreement is suitable for all parties concerned. But then we know that domestic manufacturers have been consistently against Nigeria's membership of the WTO. Do they have a justification for this position?
Harriet, I think there is enough justification for this. And, you know, I finished my speech with, you know, commending the Nigerian delegation. It is not that everything was gotten. By the time you look at the entire agreement, what was secured from Bali in a very analytical manner. Of course, if anybody comes up to say, look, this wasn't a very good agreement for us, that person might be right. And of course, I am also among the school of thought that even though Nigeria played its role, however, the fact that, just like Ubiola said, the big boys are on the table and they dictate it, you also begin to, if you do a post-mortem of the agreement that was secured in Bali, you will find out a lot of issues. Now, take for instance, on agriculture, where you started from. If you look at agriculture, the issue there is subsidy. And it was India that wanted to rock the boat. Why? The reason is very, very simple. India said we have 70% of our population as farmers. And we also have 75% of our population as poor, rural poor. Therefore, take a situation where in 2010, I give you some statistics. In 2010 alone, you found out that, you know, India has about 600 million farmers. And in that year 2010, European Union had about 90 billion euro as subsidy. In that in the 2010, United States had about 130 billion USD. Now, what did India provide as subsidy for her agriculture? Just $9 billion, about 90,000 rupee. Look at that. And they are all still telling India, don't stockpile. India said no. This is not possible. You are providing more subsidy than I am doing, and I have more poor than you do, and now you also want me to reduce my subsidy. That means you don't want me to grow out of poverty. You know, that's the issue. Now, the same people that are talking about Millennium Development Goals, oh, you must have to arrive at these Millennium Development Goals, this 1 to 8. These are the same people, very funny enough, the same people telling you reduce subsidy, but they are subsidizing higher. Now, take a look again at 2013 statistics, this current year. In this particular current year, the European Union, and when I'm talking about the European Union and the United States, these are the two countries, so to speak, the two entities that brought some of these proposals on the table. That
these are the big boys that we're talking about now.
Oh, sure. I'm just giving an example. You know, we have Japan there, we have Canada, we have Australia. Okay, but the two big boys, biggest boys. Okay. Now, in 2013, you see that the European Union's Common Agricultural Policy looks at about 57 billion euro out of the total budget of 132 billion euro. So 57 billion was earmarked for common agricultural policy. That means the agricultural interventions, which means 43% of their budget is meant for agriculture. What about the United States? You know, okay, before I move to the United States, in this calculation, you find out that each farmer has almost a subsidy of about, you know, per farmer investment of about 12,200 euro.
How can we begin to replicate this at home? all these numbers you're saying, it seems very interesting. Obia, you're here with me, and he's actually, saying something, his argument's very valid and very logical. But how can we begin to replicate this at home? Let
me even say that the challenge of replicating it is that even in the public sector, their view of subsidy is not right. The public sector, or let me say let me not make a generalization. The bulk of the public sector people see incentives as a waste. That's why even in export, there's what they call double dipping. If you get this, you can't get this, even though you are entitled to both. When other nations are talking about a basket of subsidies, and people are saying, if you get this, you cannot get this, even though you are entitled to both of them. I think that's where the big challenge is. First of all, what's the percentage of a budget is of agriculture, generally? Then what percentage of that is marked out for subsidy issues meant to help farmers one way or the other? So, but I think from the statistics that Ken has given, I think it's very, very enlightening. And I think those in government should, just like he said, we may not have gotten what we want. But the truth, like I said earlier, is that the developed world expects the developing world to be developing. So that some of them are graduating into the developed world, while some of the LDCs are also graduating into the... But the point it looks like we have been at a standstill. While they are moving, we are standing in the same place. But also, from the statistics, it looks like they are also helping to make sure that we are standing in the same place. And I think we should resist it. So, replicating it is something that we must do. Now that we have, like the ostrich, we have brought out our head, where the world is very happy with us and the rest of them, it is time for us to come home and do something about these things. Replicate some of these things that these people are doing, so that, accompanied with the agricultural policy, the wonderful job that the president and minister and government are doing in agriculture, if we could learn some lessons from what is going on in India, in Europe and America, I think we will be we will benefit from it a lot. Okay.
Obia, we're going to take a break now. Ken, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be looking at this Aid for Trade initiative, also contained in the WTO agreement. We'll be right back.